Hello everybody, welcome to the Intuitknit podcast. My name is Lori, your host. Welcome to my little podcast about knitting, spinning, and other creative ideas and coming together for people who are of like mind. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're new to the podcast, thanks very much for coming back. For anyone who's new, I don't know what episode this is. I forgot to check, but I think it's maybe 26. I'm not sure. Anyway, today's Wednesday, February the 28th. We're just about the end of February. We have really a mild February here in Canada. I just live in a place north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. And it's very unseasonable right now in this weather pattern. So not used to having mild weather in February in Canada. In any case, it gives lots of enthusiasm for knitting, so I'm happy about that. So that's the brighter side of it all. So today I thought I would talk a little bit about knitting, spinning, and other creative projects I'm working on, and maybe a little bit of ramble too, just what's going on here. Welcome to the episode. I think what I'll do is I'll start out with some finished objects. The name of the KAL today, or the name of the podcast today, is going to be Lost and Found. So you might see that theme coming up through this episode, and so listen up for that. So the first thing I wanted to show you that I'd finished, and because I'm known as Intuitknit on Ravelry and Intuitknit on Instagram. And so in keeping with my namesake, I thought I'd show you my finished object, which is just a KAL. I had the need for some mindless knitting that I didn't have to refer to a pattern for, so I just cast on with my Chow-Gu needles, I think 2.75 millimeter needles, and I was using some old stash, and I think it was probably, maybe even 8 years old from my stash. And it was called Fiesta Baby Boom Fiber, and it was merino, and it's in the surf colorway. So I just cast on, I think it was like 120 stitches, and just did a series of yarn overs in this section, knit up to this section where I just did a series of yarn overs, and then actually did some slip stitches to give these vertical lines that go up the cowl, and also to keep it from curling up. And then repeated the border here. Decided, maybe I'll start skein too, so I did that, and then it became maybe too long to be a cowl, so I just stopped it there and finished off with some knit stitches here. So I like it. It's very soft, it's very warm, and it's something I can wear with a lot of my garments, because I do tend to wear lots of blues, and so this would be a great addition to anything that I would wear, or I might give it as a gift, who knows. Coming closer to Christmas, you always are scouting for things that maybe somebody would like, so might give that away. But it's always fun to do intuited pieces, because you learn a lot about the stitches that give different qualities to the finished fabric. So it's nice. I really liked this kind of checkerboard pattern, and superimposed on the variegation of the yarn, I thought was kind of interesting. So I was pleased with that. It's very soft, so that was good. My next project is something that many people have been doing, and it's the project by Erica Hooser. I think it's Hooser. She is the author of the Underwing Mitts, and it's a color work pattern of fingerless mitts, and I think many of you have seen my posting on Instagram of these finished mittens. The two butterflies look a little bit different from each other, just because I was using some variegated yarn, but I don't mind it actually, so it's okay. One thing that I couldn't quite accomplish with these was to get the same row gauge for some reason. I don't know, different times I was knitting it, I guess, but as you can see here, I seem to have had maybe this one a little bit longer. And when I was knitting it, I thought, oh, I'm coming up to the end here. I better finish off before I actually complete as many rows as was given in the pattern. So this one looks a little bit shorter. I might take it out and make it actually similar, but you know, I probably won't. Just knowing me, I probably won't. But yeah, this was a good exercise in concentration for sure. In a period of time when it was difficult, but probably a saving grace to have something to focus on. Just personally losing a couple of friends to various unexpected mishaps this past couple of months. It's been kind of a saving grace to have that refuge to go to concentrate, you know, on the pattern. I would encourage you to try this pattern because it is so rewarding to see the images come up as you work through the colors, the color pattern. And there's so much opportunity to inspire you to even use different yarns in the actual butterfly. So yeah, I quite like it. This is the other side. And you kind of see that I've been working it on a DPN needle because it does have a little bit of line through the center, but that's okay. I'm not one to work on magic loop methods, so I kind of figure in the wearing it will start to work itself out. And there's a little bit of range of color dominance here because sometimes when I carry the yarn, I find that if I have to carry it over too many stitches, that I will capture the yarn, but sometimes the length of those stitches will change according to the pattern. So for instance, let's see where, oh yeah, up here, you see there's quite a long distance where you'd have to carry the darker yarn across here. And so, you know, in some areas, it would be the opposite. So I might have to change hands only because I usually only carry my yarn with my left hand. So because I'm a thrower, usually the other way of knitting with my left hand isn't really familiar to me, and I only carry my yarn with my left hand. So it's a little bit of a challenge that way to kind of meet the expectation of having consistent color dominance. You notice it most with the palm there. It maybe does look a little bit inconsistent, but do you know what? I'm the only one that probably will ever notice that. So I'm not really worried about it. And I'm quite happy with the finished gloves. I must tell you, I knit these because I didn't have any gray or black in the usual 4-ply, say Jameson's yarn that you'd normally knit these in. I went to my local yarn store and I was advised that a good substitution would be our Briggs and Little yarn that comes from New Brunswick here in Canada. So this is their sock weight. I guess it actually is called sport weight, but as you notice, you can notice, it's a single ply. And I found it in the color work of this pattern, because these two yarns were both Briggs and Little single ply wool, they were tending to fight me because with a single ply yarn, it still has some energy in it. And the single ply, especially if you're pairing it with another one and trying to keep the two yarns apart, it can be very challenging because the two want to kind of mesh together given the energy in both of them. So I don't think I would probably do this again. I started out, was a good girl and finished it, but I truly think if I knit with this yarn again, I probably wouldn't do color work because I'd probably only want to tackle one skein at a time given the energy in the yarn. So that's just my own personal preference. The yarn itself is lovely when it's knit up. It has lovely texture. It's not the softest yarn, but it's probably a very hard-working yarn. It's 100% wool. So yeah, Briggs and Little. And many of you are familiar with that type of yarn. So yeah, so that was my, I think the main thing that I have been working on in terms of knitting was completing these gloves, and I'm quite happy with them. They're not really a black, they're a charcoal color, and I quite like that because it kind of mutes out the color contrast, and I kind of like that. So yeah. The duplicate stitching was not my forte, but you know, kind of in keeping with my way of approaching knitting, it didn't bother me because I kind of figure in nature you see the variance too of different elements in nature. So you know what, I don't mind it. So you can see that the duplicate stitch is not as close knit as the other regular stitches. But yeah, not sure if I would do it again. I probably will challenge myself with another type of colorwork pattern if I do that again. So, but it was good to have on my needles when it was. One thing I found that made it a lot easier, and I'm hoping I can find it here because I believe I brought it here to show you. Oh, here it is when I was working on the colorwork graph, I used this highlighter tape. And it's excellent because you can keep moving it up. But with the highlighter tape, it leaves in focus the previous row, so you can read your knitting quite easily. With this highlighter tape being the width that it is, you can keep moving it up on the graph pattern, and it doesn't really mark up your pattern. It's easy to lift off the pattern, and so I could make a long strip that would carry me across both the palm side and the figure side. So I'd recommend that highlighter tape to anybody doing color work because it is a really great way to, as I say, read your knitting and sort of stay on track. Very often you have to look at the row beneath the row you're working on to make sure that you're actually doing what you should be doing at any given time. So I'd recommend that. Yeah, so I also completed this tunic, and I think I've shown the pattern to you before. This is the Westwater tunic. The Squam, it's original for Squam, Sam Lamb original for Squam, and it's called the Westwater tunic. So I completed this. It's just cotton, and I'm quite happy with it. I did the version without the tab in the front, and it's got pockets in it. So I just have been wearing it with leggings. It's quite forgiving if you have any issues with waist slenderness and so on, but yeah, I quite like it. And one of my friends saw it hanging up in my sewing room, and she said, "Oh, it looks like one of the old maternity tops I used to wear." I guess it might be sort of considered to be a little bit maternity-like, but I actually quite like that. It's very, very comfortable. You would probably also be wise to make it in a very soft knitted fabric too, because that would lend itself to some of the drape of it too. So what I've done is I have cut out another one, and I have yet to start it, but I thought I might do it in this color. I think I showed it last time on the podcast. And there is, on the inside of the collar, there's an option, or at least part of the pattern is to enclose that seam on the collar with a contrasting color. I haven't chosen a contrasting color, but for that placket in the front, I'm making it this color. So it'll just be a bit of interest that probably I'll be the only one to notice. But it was fun picking up the fabrics just to see all the variation that you could have for that. So yeah. So that's my tunic. have I made anything else with sewing? It seems like I'm forgetting something, but if I have, then I'll probably bring it to you next time. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this tunic. So I've been doing some sewing, just actually haunting some of the fabric places, looking at fabrics that would lend itself to this one and another dress that I'm hoping to make, and also looking at different patterns. And I always go through the bin that has, I guess, expired patterns, patterns that are no longer in circulation. And I found this really neat one. It's a very easy Vogue pattern, and I think it will be flattering to me. It's really drapey in the front. Again, it has that kind of maternity look to it. But in this version, there's an ability to make two vertical panels that go up the front. And I think that will be very flattering to anyone wanting to elongate their figure as well. So yeah, this was like, I don't know, 50% off its usual price. So I was really happy to get that. So stay tuned. You might see me wearing that. I think this crew neck is probably what I'll do, because I like the neckline of a crew neck. It seems to be flattering to me at this age. So I'm going to probably do that. Yeah. So the other thing that I've been working on is, oh no, don't tell me I haven't. Oh yeah, okay, here it is. The other thing I've been working on is some spinning. And so in my quest to enlarge my repertoire of spinning methods, I've always admired people who can do the long draw method. It just seems to be so, I don't know, flowing and fast, I think, and less kind of controlled. So I'm really drawn to that whole aspect of spinning, because up to now I've really been doing just the short draw. That's probably not the term for it, but it's when you have your yarn sort of pulled out just small in the front of you, and you're looking at the drafting zone, and it's not very long. But with the long draw method, you have quite a length of yarn that is putting twist in it, and you're actually seeing the twist go up and then feeding it to your wheel. And I had some roving that I think I had won or something. I went to the Port Hope spinning event that's called The Gathering. It's on every year. It's coming up this spring. It's called The Gathering in Port Hope, Ontario. And I think I'd won a door prize at the last minute and was given like a $10 voucher or something to just spend wherever. And because it was at the end, I sort of was running wildly looking at things that I could purchase. I ended up buying some unknown fiber content, but looked interesting to me, and I probably didn't examine it very closely. So as it turns out, this fiber wasn't very well prepared. It was in roving, but it was, I think, full of a few nips, and I didn't want to take the time to really refine it. So I just started to do long draw with it, and the resulting fiber, I think, I can't show you on the spool anymore because it's all plied up now, but the resulting fiber was quite inconsistent. So at the time when I saw that on the spool, this purple color, I thought, how can I make that more controlled? So what I did was I spun up some BFL fiber that I made into a very kind of thread-like width, and I thought that might control some of the unruliness of the fiber. So yeah, that's the resulting plying that I did with that. So I actually kind of like it. I think it'll be excellent for mitts, because anytime you get this woolen spun yarn, it tends to have an airiness about it, which traps air, which translates into better insulation. So I think mitts will be a really good choice for this. And yeah, it's kind of one of those wild yarns that you might have in your stash and pick up for a project like a nice warm hat or some really warm mittens. So yeah, that was my spin for this month. I am now spinning up some yarn or some some roving that I got at, I think I got it at Rhinebeck the first year that I ever went to Rhinebeck, which was probably at least 4 years ago now. And I'm carrying it into this lovely basket I picked up at a thrift store just lately. I just love the asymmetry of it. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, I gotta have that. It doesn't sit very well, but you know, it just has an appeal to me that you can't really duplicate with something that's factory made, of course. So I love that for keeping roving in. Anyway, so right now I'm spinning up this lovely roving. It's merino, yak, and cultured silk. Cultured or cultivated? I think it's cultivated. Sheep Shed Mountain View Farm, and I got this at the Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool Festival. It's lovely. I'm not going to spin this with a long draw method because it's just so fine. And usually coarse fibers probably will be a better fit for me trying long draw because I don't have the control that some people probably have at this point in time. So I'm probably just going to do this with a short draw and just do a worsted yarn. Yeah, so it's very fine, and it's actually quite a lovely spin. I'm really enjoying that. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing for spinning. Right now I'm working on a project. I probably can't show you the original email that my daughter sent me, but she had in her mind that she wanted to have some, they're kind of like knitted shorts that she found on Pinterest. And so, you know, to a non-knitter, that might seem like an easy thing for someone to duplicate because, yeah, you seem to be doing miraculous things, so why couldn't you do this for me, you know? But anyway, she asked me if I would make her these. They look more like underwear, really, but they were shorts, so at least the closest that I could find to what she was trying to get at was a shorts pattern. So what I've done is I looked through Ravelry patterns. Actually, I'm keeping it in my lovely Perth Festival of Yarn bag that I got from Helen of the Stitched with Sprite. Helen from the Stitch with Sprite podcast, and on Instagram she's Sprite966, I think it is. Sorry, Helen, I'm all mixed up this morning, but you know what I mean. And I really treasure that she sent me this because I'd love to be able to go there sometime. Anyway, that's what I'm keeping it in. So it's actually, let's see if I can get the yarn labels here that I just dumped on the floor. I'm knitting it out of Drops Charisma, which is actually it's a treated wool. It's a superwash treated wool, but it's fairly soft, and I don't usually work with superwash wool, but it seemed to be the closest thing to what I was trying to achieve. So she wanted sort of like underwear that she could wear, and it looked like kind of this pattern. So I've completed the first part of this. What I'm trying to do is follow a similar pattern in a book that I got from the library, and it was called More Modern Top-Down Knitting, and its author is Krista McGowan, and it's basically based on templates from Barbara Walker. So I'm knitting these shorts pattern, this shorts pattern, and see if I can find it here. Yeah, so it's a knitted shorts pattern. I haven't got the picture of it here because I sometimes don't print off the picture in favor of just printing off the text. But I'm varying a little bit because what I've done instead of made it just plain knitting is I've done a 2x2 rib, and then I did some ridges of purl stitches to sort of make this vertical element come through. So now I'm into the area where I'm going to be dividing and doing the legs. So hopefully this will be what she'll she'll want. My daughter's very slender, so I'm doing the very smallest size, but I think it'll work out well. And I'll be interested to know what wearing woolen underwear is like. I think she probably doesn't want to wear it next to her skin necessarily, but knitted shorts, I haven't really had any knitted shorts in my life, but I guess she's going to give me the details on how that wears. But yeah, so I'm fairly happy with that. So I'm actually knitting the stripes in this in a Cascade 220 Sport. So the stripes are of that. So yeah. So stay tuned. You might see those finished in the next little while. I just wanted to give you a few details on what I've been acquiring. In the fabric department, as I said, I have been looking and finding many things that I think will satisfy my dream sewing. So I've been picking out fabrics that aren't really too patterned, but will lend themselves to tunics and dresses that I could just wear over a t-shirt and maybe wear with leggings. And so I've found these. This one is kind of neat. It's, I don't know if you can pick it up in this light, but it's actually almost looks like little stars or little planets, and that kind of appealed to me. This is just cotton. And then I found this one, which is more of a gold pattern, but it has some text on it, and the text relates to different types of tea. So given that I love this color, this sort of honey color, I thought that would be very nice to see if I can make a garment out of. I think it might suit me. Yeah. And then this one is kind of like, almost like a woven, it looks like it's hand woven almost. And I thought that was a very nice one to make something sort of unobtrusive that I could wear maybe with jeans or something like that. So yeah, so those are my acquisitions for sewing. And I find that if I just get 2 yards of 45-inch fabric, I can usually do something pretty substantial with that. So that's been my guide for hunting out fabrics lately. And let's see, what else? I wanted to tell you how lucky I've been, because I don't know when the last time was that I ever entered something and won, but on Instagram this past couple of months has been really fruitful for me, entering contests. And I entered one that was on Instagram and from Hugh Loco, and I managed to win the yarn. So that was fun, from Natalie at Hugh Loco. And this is her Phyllis sock, and it's in I Smell Teenagers colorway, so that's a kind of fun colorway, but it's all these beautiful greens and turquoises. And I think for this one, I might try to incorporate it into my version of a faded garment that I probably will just sort of find and try to adapt to that whole method of fading fabrics in and out. Because I have some turquoises that, you know, will go nicely with this. So thanks very much, Natalie. That's really lovely. One thing about me winning prizes that originate in the States, though, is that I usually will have to pay duty when they arrive here. So for this skein of yarn, I had to pay $16 of Canadian duty when it did fall into my hands, which kind of muddies it a little bit for enthusiasm for winning things, certainly. Even though it's well worth $16, I'm not begrudging that, but yeah, it's just a bit of a shock when the postman comes knocking and says, you owe $16, and you know it's a prize that you've won. The other one that I won was, and if you haven't watched Josh of Dairyland Knits, I really would encourage you to watch that podcast. He's a delight. His chuckle and his laugh just cheer me up so much when I watch that podcast, and he's a very proficient knitter and has some really ambitious projects that he undertakes. So yeah, I would really encourage you to go there. You probably already know him. But what I won through his I think it was an Instagram. No, it was actually a podcast contest that he proposed. I won this lovely Sun Valley fiber yarn in a BFL, 100% BFL superwash DK. And I won it in the Renaissance colorway. That's a color of my choosing, which is wonderful. When I won this, I was able to go on the website and choose any colorway that I liked. So this was lovely. I really love this raspberry, deep raspberry color. And I have some other yarns that are similar. So I may do the same thing, you know, incorporate different yarns that have the same weight into one project, and see about making a finished object with some of this. So yeah, I was so pleased. Now this has a story too, because it was lost for a certain amount of time in the mail, and I kind of thought, well, it is a gift, so if it's lost permanently, I'm not going to go back and, you know, complain about it. So I think I won this maybe, was it almost 2 months ago? And I thought, well, it's for certain it's gone because I haven't seen it in my mailbox. Well, then I did find it in my mailbox. It was double wrapped, so whether somebody had opened the original and then rewrapped it and put my address on, I'm not certain, but it was a mystery. But for this one, actually originating in the States, in Wisconsin, I didn't have to pay duty on. So I think it was because it was listed as a gift. So for anyone winning prizes or anyone giving and delivering prizes, if you mark gift on it, it may actually be that duty will not have to be paid at the other end, which is always appreciated. But I just love this yarn. It's beautiful. And thank you so much to Sun Valley Fibers. I think I have the little card that she sent me here of her sheep, and from George Jeanette. George Jeanette. Oh. So maybe it's actually a male owner of the Sun Valley Fibers. I should know that, but I'm sorry about that. Anyway, that was lovely to receive, and I do thank you. I also got some lovely needles for doing any finishing on yarn, so that's great. Okay, one of the things that is in my dream knitting this week is I get library books out on knitting very often. I've reviewed them here on my podcast. I just find that I love looking through them, and then I can decide whether I'd like to invest in a book. And this time I got a pattern out of Vogue Knitting magazine, and it was for the Spring-Summer 2017 edition of that magazine. And I saw this lovely cowl by Meg Swanson. It's called the Rorschach Sanquar cowl. I think I'm pronouncing it properly. Anyway, it's a worsted weight cowl, and I would love to be able to do that one. I guess color work has gotten into my blood since I finished those underwing knits, so I may undertake that. So seems like a fairly comprehensive short pattern, so yeah, I think I will do that next. Okay, so the theme of this podcast, as you can see in the title, is Lost and Found. And I guess this last couple of months have been, you know, in keeping with that theme, having lost two friends as I have recently, knowing that I can never get those people back. And so, you know, reflecting on things that have been lost, but also thinking on things that have been found, and sometimes being grateful for things that are found when they're lost. And not to trivialize my losses, but I had a story too where I went to the library with my son, and some of you might know my son has special needs, and very often, you know, he'll forget his mitts or hat in various places, and we usually can go back and get those things if we think of it right away. But we went to the library, and I had given him a pair of mitts that I had made. These pair of mitts were just intuited, but I had made them out of Briggs & Little yarn in this black and blue pattern. And it does take some work to do these colorwork patterns, so they do end up being quite precious and not something you want to just, have for short term. You want to keep them in your life. Anyway, I let him wear these mitts. Got out to the car, and he said, of course, he didn't have his mitts. So back we went, and I looked in all the usual places, but no mitts. And it was a busy Saturday. There was lots of people there, and people there coming out of the cold. And I thought, well, somebody has picked them up, and hopefully they're going to be able to use them. But still all the while missing, having these gloves in my life. And so I kind of made up my mind that I was going to be without these gloves, these mittens. So then, lo and behold, last week we went to the library, and because my son makes friends with the librarians there, they know exactly what's going on with him as he visits them every week. And so we went in, and the librarian says right away, "Oh, yeah, I've got something for you." And out come my mittens that I thought I had lost. I was so overjoyed, because sometimes, you just wonder where those things have gone. If you've put some work and effort into making something, it's almost like they become part of your children, like you kind of covet them. And so anyway, I was really so overjoyed when they found them. I thought it was a miracle that they could find those mitts after we'd looked so diligently for them the week before. So just a reminder that sometimes things do work out for the better. To add to that, I know that I've lost a shawl that I've made. I probably have shown that shawl on a previous podcast. I'm certain that I have. It was a shawl that I made out of my hand spun. I think it was the only shawl that I had made at the time out of hand spun. So it was quite precious to me, and try as I might, I've looked for that up and down. I don't know where it's gone, whether I've left it somewhere or maybe I've left it in the car. I don't know, but it's yet to be found. So that's one of my missing loved ones that I'm going to have to keep a lookout for. It just seems like I've been listening to, I've been trying to do things that are reclaiming things that are missing. So I just thought maybe what I would do is to have a KAL coming up in the next month or so. Maybe finishing more toward the summer, that would be more fair, but I'll make a thread in my Ravelry group for this podcast, and the theme will be Lost and Found. You can make any project and tell me any story that you want regarding how the project fits with this theme of being lost and found. You can broaden that to mean anything that you want, but I would just be interested in this whole idea of lost and found. It could be the fiber you use, the project you are missing and find, or anything like that. These can be things that you have made as of today, or are in progress right now. But I would love to see anything that fits with that theme of being lost and found. So I don't know what the prizes will be just yet, but when I do pick that person's project at random, what I'm going to do is reflect on what they've told in their story about the project, and then get a gift that's personalized for that story as best as I can do. And I will give you a gift to acknowledge your participation in this KAL. So you can enter as many projects as you want, but keep in mind that I would love to hear the story attached to each project that you enter. And so good luck. I'll probably close the thread probably in early June, probably June, let's say June 1st. And that'll give you lots of time to come up with a project. It can be small or large, doesn't matter. yeah, I would love to hear your stories about that. So, I sometimes have reflected on my background and I've told you that I was a painter, more prolific painter years ago when I had a studio. And in that studio, sometimes we would do readings that would be resonant for people who were women and who had an interest in women's kind of issues and reflections. So at the time in the studio, we were talking about that book by Clarissa Pinkola called Women Who Run with the Wolves. This was in the 1990s that I had my studio, and I would have reading nights at that studio. And at the time, I would be painting, in the studio, but hosting these reading nights at the studio. And one of the friends that I've lost just lately used to attend that group, and I really treasured her participation in it. So when I was looking through my past paintings, I found this one, which I was doing at the time when we used to host those women's nights. And the theme of this painting was of Gaia, and it was supposed to be about being awake, sleeping, and dreaming. So the three elements, the being awake, sleeping, and dreaming, were kind of progressing through the painting. So I thought for today's podcast, I would put it up kind of in tribute to my friend that I've lost, because she always validated me in times when I really needed to be validated as a young mom, and a mom who's kind of struggling with issues of children's health and that sort of thing. So anyway, as a tribute to her, I thought I'd put it in my background today. So yeah, I hope that February is bringing all good things to you, that you're not losing too much, and that you're finding everything you want. So please enter the knit along in my podcast group on Ravelry, and I hope March brings great things for you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.